like so many parents, I didn't know what to expect and what an IEP really was. I just knew that she had dyslexia and I wanted them to do something about it. But I didn't really know at that time what they needed to do or what the best interventions were. And so kind of ended up with a pretty crappy IEP, to be honest.
I'm Nicole Holcomb, attorney by day and podcaster by night, a former educator, school counselor, and administrator, and mom to a 9-year-old daughter with dyslexia, who loves all things Harry Potter, Minecraft, and science. A few years ago, she was identified with dyslexia, and our life seemed to turn upside down for a while, quite literally. I created the Dyslexia Mom Life Podcast to help you navigate the upside down journey of dyslexia. You got this. If you're wanting to thrive as a mom in this dyslexia journey, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. You are listening to the Dyslexia Mom Life Podcast, episode 57. I'm your host, Nicole Holcomb, and I'm so glad that you're here with us today. We are kicking off a special 3-part series all about the IEP experience. We are calling it the IEP Bootcamp. I am partnering with attorney Sabrina Axl to bring to you everything you need to know about an IEP. Today is the first part of our series, and today Sabrina is going to be sharing with you her personal journey to special education law, and she's going to be sharing with us the 3 tips to a successful IEP. In part 2 of the series, we are going to be talking about the anatomy of an IEP, really the fundamental pieces of an IEP, what that is all about, and what you can expect. In the third part, we're going to be talking about the annual IEP, and we are going to include information about what do you do after COVID, and looking at regression, compensatory ed, all the great things that you probably aren't even aware of yet. So I look forward to sharing with you this information and this IEP Bootcamp, and I'm excited to partner with Sabrina. So sit back, relax, and enjoy our conversation all about the IEP. Sabrina, welcome to the show. I am so excited for you to be here for this IEP Bootcamp. I can't think of a better person to have on the show to talk about IEPs. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I am so ready to dive in. But before we do, can you just spend a couple minutes introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about the work that you do now?
My name is Sabrina Axl. I am a special education attorney and advocate in the Bay Area, California. I started practicing in 2006. I've always practiced in the Bay Area. I started off doing insurance defense litigation. It wasn't my favorite practice area, but it's what I kind of fell into. And we'll talk about it later, but, just personal circumstances, I ended up taking a turn. And now I do special education. That is where my true passion lies. So I set up my firm recently, and I'm doing all virtual consultations and everything, and it's great. It's so fulfilling. I love it.
That's great. I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm sure that was a little bit of a jump, but I'm so glad that you jumped over to a different side to work with us, because I'm excited to talk more about your work, and we'll do that too. You spoke a little bit, so let's just jump in and talk about that, which is you actually have a personal reason and a passion of your own that brought you to the world of IEPs and the world of special education. And so do you mind sharing a little bit about your story and your family story with us?
So when my daughter was in kindergarten, I started noticing that she had trouble reading and writing. Everybody always says you're not supposed to compare your child to anybody else's. But I started noticing that she couldn't do things that like everybody else could. And I was starting to get a little worried. So I actually quit my job. I didn't love the insurance defense, and I felt like, a guilty working mother.
Yes, I can relate.
So I quit my job to spend more time with her and work with her on school. And so I worked with her every day after school. I got her a reading tutor. She was in the remedial reading program at school. I even put her in Sylvan Learning Center for thousands of dollars. Her teacher, her first grade teacher, was doing small group reading intervention for the kids that were, really struggling. And we threw all this intervention at her and nothing worked. So I started to wonder, well, why isn't this working? And so I put my research cap on and I started looking for patterns. What was she good at? What was she struggling with? And I noticed that when she would try to read, she frequently guessed at words. She couldn't sound out words. She had no fluency in her reading. Her writing was terrible. It was like chicken scratch, and she write things backwards. And I kind of at first chalked it up to her being a lefty, but then I was like, no, something else is going on. So actually, initially, I thought she had ADHD because her teacher was complaining that she would check out during class and had trouble focusing. And she definitely developed also pretty severe anxiety as well. So I went and I talked with her pediatrician, and she's like, well, are the attention issues causing the school problems, or are school problems causing the attention issues? And I hadn't really thought about it that way. And, when
That's
she
a good question.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, well, I go, actually, I think it might be school problems causing the inattention. And so anyway, when I mentioned that she had issues with decoding, she recommended full academic testing. She's like, you've got to get her tested. This can be a sign of dyslexia. And I was like, what? Dyslexia? And so I did insist on testing. I started doing my own research on dyslexia. And then the more I looked at it, I was like, oh my God, that is what she has.
Right.
So that's how I got into it. I went through the IEP process myself.
What grade was that she got tested?
So I demanded testing at the very end of first grade. And when I went into the SST meeting, like happens with so many parents, I was told, well, we don't test kids until they're 2 grade levels behind.
Yep.
Or, you really, you need to think about this because, special ed, she's going to be stigmatized and she's going to be pulled out and everybody's going to know. And, then of course, oh, well, we don't test for dyslexia. That's the other thing. Give it time. She'll grow out of it, all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And I just held firm. I was like, no, something is not right here. And I'm never going to let her get 2 grade levels behind. That's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. So I demanded testing, but because it was the end of first grade, mm-hmm. The timeline, it didn't work out that they actually did the testing until fall of 2nd grade.
Okay.
And at that time, wouldn't you know, she had dyslexia. And then we started with the IEP and, it was awful. It was awful. It's one of those things where I've kind of learned from, my mistakes, because I didn't know, like so many parents, I didn't know what to expect and what an IEP really was. I just knew that she had dyslexia and I wanted them to do something about it. But I didn't really know at that time what they needed to do or what the best interventions were. And so I kind of ended up with a pretty crappy IEP, mm-hmm. to be honest.
So from there, that story really, and thank you for sharing, as you think about your own personal story and the families that you work with now, we've talked a little bit offline as well. And I know that you said that IEP was just awful. And I know that that's one of our reasons we're doing this, right? We want to give this 3-part series, this boot camp, so that other moms will know a little bit more about what to expect and a little bit more of what to ask. So hopefully they go in with more education and know kind of what should I be asking. And, so many times, parents, we trust the educators working with our children that they want what's best for them. But as I'm sure you found out, as we found out, educators are not as up to date on what dyslexia is and how to best help our kids and how to best write an IEP even, right? And so the services that you're providing to the show is just invaluable. So I appreciate that. One thing that stuck in my mind before we move on is you said, for some parents, they hear these, there's so many acronyms in education anyway, but I think let's start here. How would you describe an IEP? Like if someone asked you, well, I don't even know what that means, Sabrina, what is an IEP? So let's start there before we start talking about other pieces of it.
Well, an IEP is individualized education plan, and it is a legal document. It is a living document, so it can be changed at any time, but basically it sets out what your child's present levels of academic achievement are. What can they do right now? What are their goals for the future? How are we going to achieve those goals by either accommodations or services, special ed, and then how those are going to be measured to make sure we get the intervention that is individually tailored to the student.
Right. And I think that part is so important. That individualized piece is so essential, especially to our dyslexic learners, because they are so different. You were sharing many things earlier about your personal journey with your daughter. And I can tell you a lot of the things resonate with me, things that we also experienced. And we had her evaluated, our daughter evaluated in first grade. And so I know many people that are listening are like, yep, same thing. And so as they think about, going with what they know, we are our child's expert. We know our children best, and we know when something's just not right. Yeah. And so we have to follow that. And for someone listening, they've either followed that and they've decided that their child is dyslexic, or they're just beginning this journey trying to figure all this out. So when we think about an IEP meeting, we also have to talk about, how does one become eligible to even what most people call an initial IEP meeting. So before we talk about some success tips, can we talk a little bit about how do we even get to the meeting? How do we even you talked a little bit about an evaluation. Can we give them a little bit more to just kind of figure out, well, can I just call and ask for an IEP meeting? How does that work?
Okay. Yeah. So if you suspect that your child has a disability, dyslexia or dysgraphia, autism, anything like that, what you should do is you should request an evaluation in writing. It needs to be in writing. If it's not in writing, the number one rule of special education, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. So
document.
Golden rule right there.
Right.
So put it in writing. Email is fine. Send it to the principal and your child's teacher and, various, school personnel. Say, I am concerned that my child may have learning disabilities. My child may have dyslexia. This is what I have noticed. This is why I am concerned. And I would like to request full academic evaluation at, a public expense. And at that point, they have a certain amount of time in which they have to put together a testing plan. They send that to the parent, and the parent has to consent. So once you consent, then they have 60 days to conduct the evaluation and then hold the initial IEP meeting. And at that meeting, you will go over the results of their evaluation. So go over all the testing, what they found, and what they think needs to be done. And then that's where you work with your school team, your IEP team, to begin drafting the IEP document to get your child the services they need.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. I think that'll be helpful as we talk about the next pieces. So one of the things we talked about that we thought would be the best way to kind of kick off this boot camp and getting started is really giving moms some tips about how to have a successful IEP meeting. And so it doesn't matter if it's your initial meeting or it's just, the meeting for this year, your annual meeting, or you've got to call, an IEP meeting for some other reason to make an amendment. As moms listen about, the IEP meeting process, can you share some tips? I believe you have 3 tips for a successful IEP meeting, because I would love for them to walk in confident and ready to go with some tips.
Yeah. So the very first is always be prepared. And by being prepared, first and foremost, you have to understand your rights and the school's responsibilities. Do not walk into that meeting without knowing what an IEP is or what the IDEA is. You need to understand that information. And just for reference, the IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And that is the federal law that spells out what your rights are as a parent and what the school's responsibilities are. So to understand your rights, there's lots of good information on the internet. My favorite are Rights Law, WRIGHTSLAW. Pete Wright is an attorney. He's dyslexic himself, and there's lots of really good information there. Another one is understood.org. I like those. That you at least consult with a special education advocate or an attorney before your meeting. And I don't say that just because, I want business or anything like that. It is actually really important because every case is different. And I know a lot of parents will reach out to other parents, and that's helpful to get their experience, but you can't always take that as gospel. And I have actually seen a lot of misinformation in parent chat groups. So it really is worth your while to consult with somebody who truly knows what to do and can spell out the process for you in detail, and you know that it's correct. You really, really do have to understand your rights, because you cannot rely on school personnel to explain your rights and their responsibilities. It's what you talked about before. The schools, sometimes personnel just don't know the law. They're not up to date. They just know what they've been told by their district supervisors. Sometimes they tell you flat out wrong. I actually had a principal tell me that dyslexia is not real. So we all know that it is. So come up, and so you know how to recognize what's true and what's not when you walk into that meeting. The next part of being prepared, once you are familiar with what your rights are, is to collect data. You show what is working and what isn't working with your child. I recommend parents keep a diary or a notebook of some kind and just write down, a paragraph every day. It doesn't have to be detailed. It doesn't need to be anything elaborate, but just keep notes on, how your child reacts to certain homework, what they're struggling with, what's working, what's not, their attention span. Just write down little notes. And then as you do that, you can go back and look at it to see if there's any patterns that emerge. So that's always helpful. And then you can take that data and share it with your IEP team. And, they will share with you what they see at school. And, you can share what you have seen at home during homework and things like that. it's also a good way to kind of help you organize your own thoughts and make sure thing. I will say that there's two schools of thought here. A lot of people talk about preparing a parent agenda as part of getting prepared for your IEP meeting. And I think that that's extremely helpful. You should have it written down because, emotions get high. You don't want to forget anything. So if you create a parent agenda, I want to talk about these 3 or 4 things. This is what I want to get out of this meeting. Now, there's two schools of thought on this, whether to give that parent agenda to the school in advance of the meeting or to hold off. And it really depends on the individual situation. I have seen it go both ways. So the idea of giving it to the school ahead of time kind of sets the tone for the meeting. I have actually seen schools use the parent agenda as the meeting agenda and gave the parent everything they wanted. It shows that you're prepared, you know what you're doing. You're taking this seriously. On the flip side, some people disagree with providing that information up front because it gives the school time to refute all the reasons why you think your child is entitled to XYZ service, and gives them time to, convince you that they don't need it or they don't qualify. So you kind of have to just read your own individual situation on that one. But I think it can be helpful in a lot of cases. So do you have any questions before we move on to the second?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. So one of the things I think I hear you saying too is that, and I talk about this a good bit with my community, is that if going in what type of relationship you have with your school, and probably 9 times out of 10 you do, then you can also kind of gauge that to know if that agenda would be helpful or not ahead of time, is what it sounds like. And the other thing I was wondering too, one of the things that I've noticed.
Yeah, definitely.
One of the things that I've noticed is that even like the state Department of Education or the district website is helpful because some states don't recognize dyslexia. They may say specific learning disability, and that confuses parents because they know under the IDEA it says dyslexia. And so that can also get the meeting kind of sideways. So, one of the things I tell people is, be familiar with what the State Department of Education recognizes for special education services. Exactly. Do you talk a little bit about that with your clients as well? Just so they're knowledgeable going in.
Yes,
so they're not, again, going back to that be prepared part.
Yes, exactly. And California does recognize dyslexia, but it's kind of a recent thing. But I just have to say, just as a little side note on being prepared, I've seen many times where the school tells parents, oh, well, we don't test for dyslexia. And that's true. They're not testing for, whether your child meets the clinical definitions of dyslexia. But what they're testing for is whether they're eligible for special education services under the IDEA, and that would be specific learning disability. That's the category that dyslexia falls under. So don't be dissuaded from pursuing testing through your school just because the school says, oh, well, we don't test for dyslexia. It's true, but it's kind of a misnomer. Yeah, they do. Right. So make sure you understand that going into it.
Yes. Because in Georgia, we're changing some things up, but here in Georgia, it's still our daughter was specific learning disability, and they would not say the word dyslexic when I asked. So that was a couple years, but I think there's still some districts doing that here where we're at locally. So, and I know people are listening in lots of different locations. So I just wanted to make sure to put that out there so that wouldn't be confusing. So I think that you provided a good summary of that. So that was helpful.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So tip number 2 is be professional. Now, emotions run high, but you really, really, really need to parent hat and put on your this as a business negotiation. And I know that that's difficult. It's very emotionally charged. It's very stressful and frustrating sometimes, but do whatever you can to kind of put the emotion aside. It's going to keep back on your meeting and make things flow better. You're actually going to be a lot more efficient that way. It's really important to maintain your credibility in the meeting. So yelling and name calling and crying hysterically, that's not going to help your cause. And it could be used against you. So you really, really want to maintain your credibility, your professionalism, because you may need it down the road if you have to file for due process.
And I would think that parent agenda would help with that, right?
Really,
because you've got something in front of you that can kind of help you stay grounded.
You're calling or shouting and you lose all credit with your IEP team. And you may not get anywhere being nice either. You get a lot further than if you just start getting mad and start yelling and screaming at people. You will be labeled as that parent, and you don't want to be that person. It will be used against you. So it's important to maintain your level head and keep your credibility in the meeting. And if, it can be really 7, 8 people on the other side of the table and then you. And, if that, bring us or person. You can bring anybody you want to the meeting. Bring a spouse, bring your mom, bring your sister, a friend, bring an advocate, whoever you need to kind of be your support person, keep you on track, keep you grounded, and just help you get through the meeting.
I said, it sounds like that person would also be a good person just to kind of keep you calm and grounded. So, you can let them know ahead of time, maybe have a signal or let's step out and take a break or whatever they need to do if they feel like, you need to do that
and
as
you
a
do
parent.
Need to
so
let
I love that advice.
Your IEP team know that you're going to bring somebody, just FYI. Let them know that you're going to bring someone. It's not a problem. So the third tip, the third P of a successful IEP meeting is be persistent. And what I mean by be persistent is you need to keep asking questions until you understand what is being proposed. You need to understand what the evaluations are saying about your child. You need to understand anything that is written in the IEP, what accommodations or services are going to be provided to your child. How will we know if they're working? How will we know if actions are actually working? And you need to ask for specifics. Don't just take a vague response and say, okay. Keep asking questions. Just keep asking. And, if you get told no, ask why. Keep asking those questions because this is a negotiation. And the school can offer you whatever they want to offer you. But you also can propose whatever you want to. You don't have to accept what the school offers the first time. Just thinking of it as a jumping off point for negotiations. It isn't a take it or leave it. If you don't like what the school is offering, propose what you want. It's meant to be a collaborative process. So, there should be a free exchange of information, and it's not a one-sided conversation. You should express your concerns. You should ask questions, and that's not being difficult. Don't let it devolve into the name calling and yelling and screaming and things like that. But you're not being difficult by asking questions and asking for proof of how this is going to help your child, because that's the bottom line. We're here to get help for your child. And the final part of that is, don't feel rushed. Sometimes IEP meetings, they don't give enough time to the parents to go through everything. Try to be as efficient as you can. But if you're asking a lot of questions and you haven't had all of your questions answered and the time for the meeting is up, don't feel pressured to, quickly sign something to get it over with, or accept a plan that you don't understand or you don't think meets your needs. There's no need to be rushed. If the meeting ends without everything being discussed, what I recommend is, while you're sitting there, have everybody pull out their pocketbooks and come up with the next time for another meeting. That's the easiest thing, because what you don't want to do is say, okay, well, let's table this and we'll come back for another meeting later, and then sit around and wait for the school to contact you with their availability. You might draw out the process doing that. But, if you can, sit there and be like, well, I'm available next Tuesday at 3. Does that work for you guys? And see if you can come to an agreement as to the next meeting right then and there. And the final note, IEP meetings, I would say, don't sign anything. Don't sign anything, no matter what. You have to sign that you were present at the met. I also not sign the IEP on the day. It's really a good idea to take it home with you, review it, let it sit for a day, come back to it, and, just really be sure it addresses every word, that this is exactly what you want. Then go ahead and sign it. But I just tell all my clients, don't sign it at the meeting, no matter what. So those are my 3 tips for successful IEP meetings.
Thank you. That was great. Yeah, it is a lot to take in, especially at an initial meeting. It's a lot to take in, trying to understand the evaluations. So that was a good tip. Thank you for that. So let's shift a little bit, and I would love.
Yeah, there's a lot of information, and you kind of just need to let it settle.
Right, exactly. And that's going to take a minute for sure, because you don't know ahead of time what you're walking into. So share with us the best mom advice that you've ever received.
The best mom advice. Well, I guess one of the best advice that I give my clients is, you are always your child's best advocate. And as a parent, particularly a mother, you know your child better than anyone else. And don't forget that, because it's easy sometimes to think, well, I'm not an educator. I don't know anything about learning disabilities. They're the experts, right? But don't discount your mother's intuition. And if something's not right to you, trust your gut and ask for testing, ask those questions, and, really be an advocate for your child, because you are your child's best advocate. And, no one else is going to do it just like you. So really trust your gut on things and move forward.
Yes. Thank you for that. What about for you though? I mean, what's been some advice that you've had, just parenting in general, that you received that you thought, wow, that's some really good advice. I've got to remember that.
I don't know.
Okay, that's fine. That's no problem. So
I don't, one of those things that's weird.
Yeah.
Like,
it's kind of a weird question sometimes.
I was the first one in the community to go through everything. So like no one really gave me advice.
You kind of learn trial by error, huh?
Yeah. So I give plenty of advice to other people. I don't have too many people give me advice.
Well, I appreciate us meeting today and talking about the 3 P's to a successful IEP meeting. And I am looking forward to our next 2 series, parts of the series, to talk more about the actual IEP and what they can expect. And then we're also going to wrap it up with that 3rd part of the series, talking about an annual IEP meeting. And I'm excited to talk about that, especially as we record this through COVID times, to talk about those pieces that may be relevant toward the end of that 3rd part. So I'm excited for us to jump back in. I hope everybody will be able to get back with us and listen to the next 2 parts of this, because I do believe these 3 parts put together will be an amazing IEP boot camp for moms to get exactly what they need as they walk into these IEP meetings. But in the meantime, if someone listens to this first part and they really want to touch base with you and to consult with you, maybe they've got their IEP coming up in the next couple of days or week or so, what's the best way for them to reach out to you if they have questions about an IEP process or want to talk to you as far as advocacy pieces? What's the best way for someone to contact you? And I'll also put that in the show notes.
Okay, yeah. So the best way to contact me is through my website. It's www.axtlegal.com, AXTLEGAL.com. On there, you can book a consultation, and I also have social media that you can follow. I have little tips and tricks on there. I am on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, all at the handle Axed Legal.
Yeah, so I found you through Instagram. I really love what you're doing there. You give some great tips and great advice there. And so I think that's a great place for people to follow and get to know you as well. So that is a great place to start, I think. Well, Sabrina, thank you so much. I have enjoyed this first part in this conversation, and I look forward to us getting back together and sharing the next 2 parts of the boot camp and getting everybody more prepared for that IEP meeting.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Now you're ready. You have the first part of the 3-part series completed, and you are walking away today with the 3 P's for a successful IEP meeting. Be prepared, be professional, and be persistent. Next week, in the 3-part series, we are going to be really just taking apart the IEP. We're going to look at the anatomy of an IEP. So when you walk into your IEP meeting, you are going to know exactly what to expect. And if you've already had an IEP meeting, Sabrina is going to break down those different pieces. So next time when we go to part 3 about the annual IEP, you'll know what follow-up questions to ask. You'll know what to ask as far as maybe some regression that you're seeing during COVID. She's going to cover all those pieces for us in the next 2 episodes. So I look forward to seeing you back here next Monday as Sabrina and I talk about the anatomy of an IEP as part of this IEP bootcamp. If you need any resources in the meantime, go to dyslexiamomlife.com. There you can also find the show notes for today's episode 57, and all of the resources and information that Sabrina shared with us today. So, enjoy your week, and remember, you got this.